You are listening to Nehemia Gordon's Raw Stream of Torah Consciousness. Thank you for supporting Nehemia's Makor Hebrew Foundation. Learn more at nehemiaswall.com.
Shalom support team. This is a study recorded in 2014, shortly before leaving China. I lived there for a year as an English teacher where I had 658 Chinese high school students. Back then I recorded one of my first support team studies entitled Shavuot Feast of Oaths. My time in China gave me the opportunity to pause for some reflection on my years of research and ministry, and the result was some pretty cool insights. Well, the sound quality is pretty bad, but it's still worth listening, and here it is.
Shalom, guys, and happy Shavuot, Chag Shavuot Sameach. This is the second installment of, I don't know what we're calling this, Nehemia rambling about the Torah. I like that name. I don't know. Anyway, so I sent one out last week, and there was some good positive feedback, and I decided I'm going to do another one for Shavuot for those who have supported my ministry, and really just again to thank you guys. It's really important. It means a lot that you've supported my ministry. It's allowed me to, get the message out and do what I'm doing. So anyway, I want to talk to you today about Shavuot, the holiday of Shavuot. And, I wrote an article, a study that was on the internet. I think it was written in like 98. I could be wrong. And it occurred to me, one of my students told me last night that it's her birthday today. She said, tomorrow's my birthday, and we're going to do something in class for her. And when were you born? 1999. And I thought, wow, I have a study on the internet that's older than this student. And it made me start to really think about it. I mean, that's a lifetime for this little girl. And what's happened to me in that lifetime? And I think one of the things that's happened to me is, if you look at the things I wrote back in 98 and that period, and certainly the way I remember it, is that I was, in a sense, I was very reactionary. And what I mean by that is, I'd come out of rabbinical Judaism, and I was what I call the ex-smoker. I had been a smoker, that is a rabbinical Jew, and I was had realized this is bad, this isn't truth, and I've got to give it up, I've got to walk away from smoking. And I had some of that ex-smoker syndrome. You know what? I had some of the spirit of Shimmy. I'll be honest with you. If you don't know who Shimmy is, you need to listen to the program that Keith and I did on the spirit of Shimmy. I think it's called The Power of Positivity or something like that. It really is, I think, one of the best things I've ever done. I'm not saying it to brag. Just when I listen to it afterwards, I'm like, did I say those things? Like, wow, I give Yehovah credit for all the correct stuff, and all the bad stuff I'll take credit. Anyway, so, I was somewhat reactionary. And when it came to Shavuot, one of the things I've been taught is Shavuot is the festival celebrating the revelation at Sinai. And my response was, where does it say that? You guys are making stuff up. And no one was ever able to show me where it said that. What they were able to say is, well, it says it in the Gemara. It says it in the oral law, in the Talmud. It says it in this midrash, in this oral law. No one was able to ever show me a verse or a word or anything that showed me a connection between Shavuot and the revelation at Sinai. And when I did look in the Tanakh, what I saw is Shavuot has two functions. And really the same function. One is, it's called Chag HaKatzil. Obviously it's called Chag HaShavuot, the Feast of Weeks. But it's also called Chag HaKatzil, the Feast of Harvest. And it's also called Yom HaBikurim, the Day of First Fruits. Now in the Christian Messianic world, there's a huge confusion. A lot of people think Day of First Fruits, a term that appears in Numbers, I believe it's 28, that refers to the Day of the Omer offering. But that is not the case. Read it in its context. It clearly is referring to Shavuot. Lists all of the feast days in which work is forbidden and certain sacrifices are brought. It's Yom HaBikurim is the day of the first fruits, which is it's another name for Shavuot. The day of the Omer offering doesn't actually have a name in the Tanakh. Anyway, I digress. So it's a harvest festival, and I can understand today we live in the 21st century, and even the rabbis living 2,000 years ago in their cities in Israel, while most of the peasants were farmers, these were the elite of society. Harvest, schmarvest, what did they care about a harvest festival? They had to find more meaning in it. They wanted to look for a spiritual meaning. And in a sense, I look back on that and I think, wow, they so took the harvest for granted that they wanted a different meaning. And so I, as a young Karaite, reacting to this, saying, as we say in Hebrew, mapitom, what are you talking about? Show me, prove it to me that it's from, that has anything to do with the revelation at Sinai. No one was able to prove anything. Now, I still say it's a harvest festival and it's a day of first fruits. That's what it says in the Word of God in the Torah. It says that explicitly. And I don't want to diminish from that or take anything away from that. But I do want to talk about the possibility that maybe there is a connection to the revelation at Sinai. And the first piece of evidence is kind of obvious, and this they were able to show me, back many years ago. But by itself, it's not definitive. But let's look at it anyway. How can we have any connection whatsoever between the revelation at Sinai and Shavuot? Well, so Shavuot takes place in the third month, okay? And the rabbinical calendar, it's always the 6th of Sivan. In the biblical calendar, it doesn't give a date. It says you count 50 days from the Sunday or Mimochat Shabbat, the Mara of the Sabbath, during the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Okay, so it says in Exodus 19, verse 1, B'chodesh HaShlishi, in the third month, Litzet B'nei Israel Miyos Mitzrayim, of the going out of the children of Israel from the land of Egypt. So all of history from this point on is counted from the going out of the land of Egypt. They went out in the first month on the 15th day of the month, and now we're in the third month. So let's say each month's the third. It's been about 45 days, give or take a day, since they left Egypt, give or take 2 days. Approximately 45 days. And it says, Bayom hazeh ba'u midbar Sinai. And this day, they came into the desert of Sinai, or the wilderness of Sinai. And this is the beginning of the story of the revelation at Sinai. Moses tells them to purify themselves for 3 days. And let's say that takes us to around the 3rd or the 4th of the month, probably the 4th. So when did the revelation at Sinai take place? We don't know exactly, but it was sometime early in the 3rd month. And Shavuot is early in the 3rd month, whether you're in the rabbinical calendar or the biblical calendar. Shavuot is early in the 3rd month. I think it's interesting, and here we say in Hebrews, this fact says, investigate me, look deeper. And the look deeper fact is that it doesn't give us the date of the revelation at Sinai, the most important event in history, where Yehovah speaks with his word to the entire people of Israel. They actually hear his voice. It's the only time in all of history where a mass group of people heard the voice of Yehovah directly. We've always heard it through prophets and intermediaries. This is the only time in all of history, and we're not given the date. And the only festival in the Torah we're not given the date for is Shavuot. So maybe there's a connection there. But that's not good enough for me. It wasn't good enough for me 15 years ago. It wasn't good, and it's not good enough for me now. That's circumstantial evidence. I need more than that. So I want to offer you more than that. And again, I'm not saying this is the doctrine of Karaites, that Shavuot is the feast of, the feast celebrating the revelation at Sinai. I'm not saying that at all. I'm proposing this as another possibility, which I actually think is correct, but this is definitely not doctrine. That Shavuot is the Feast of Weeks, that's a biblical fact. That Shavuot is the day of first fruits, that's a biblical fact. This is me suggesting another possibility, which, again, I know I'm right, but in a sense it is circumstantial evidence, but I think it's pretty strong. And my problem was when somebody comes along and says, well, no, you have to believe this is true, and this is a fact, when it doesn't say that in the Bible. That I say, no, now you're adding to the Torah. All right, so let me start out with the meaning of the word Shavuot. Okay, so what is Shavuot? Chag HaShavuot is the Feast of Weeks. Okay, that's kind of obvious. I'm not stating anything new. And what is the root? The word is Sheva, which is 7, and a week, Shavuah, is a period of 7 days. And Shavuot is the feast of the 7 days of the weeks. And why is that? Because it tells us in Deuteronomy 16, you'll count for yourself 7 weeks, then the 50th day. The day after that is the day of Shavuot. Okay, I'm all stating the obvious here. Let me get back to the issue. So, all right, so Shavuot, there's another word which is almost identical in Hebrew, which is Shvuah. And Shvuah means oath. So could there be a connection between oath and weeks? Now, I'm not the first one to propose this. This was proposed around 200 BC in a book called the Book of Jubilees. Now, the Book of Jubilees is not scripture, but it's stories and elaborations on scripture and people looking at scripture and saying, okay, well, what does this mean and what is this talking about? And sometimes, like I said, they would elaborate and make stories up. But it's interesting the stories they made up. So I'm going to read you a little passage from Jubilees. So one of the things, the Book of Jubilees, which again isn't the Bible, it was written by the Essenes, but it was written in a very early period. So the Book of Jubilees, it reads back into history the festival of Shavuot to the time of Noah, and actually all the way to creation, but that's a different story. Jubilees chapter 6, verse 1, it says, on the new moon of the 3rd month, Noah went forth from the ark and built an altar on that mountain. And there's a bunch of other things. I'll skip ahead to verse 10. It says, and Noah and his sons swore that they would not eat any blood that was in any flesh. Now, why are they doing this? Because God just commanded them, don't eat the blood, which, by the way, is commanded to all people, not just Jews. It's commanded to all mankind not to eat blood. That's actually very explicitly in Genesis chapter 9. And it had quoted Genesis 9 in Jubilee 6. And now Jubilee 6 is adding information that's not in Genesis 9, which is that Noah and his sons swore that they would not eat any blood that was in the flesh, and he made a covenant before the Lord God forever throughout all the generations of the earth in this month. So here's an interesting connection between two things, which we'll get back to in a few minutes, if I remember, which is that Noah is swearing, and the connected to swearing is making a covenant. That's an interesting connection. Did Jubilees just make that up, that covenants entail swearing? And if not, if that's really a biblical thing, that a covenant has to do with swearing, then Shavuot could be the covenant, the festival of the covenant at Sinai. In other words, the covenant at Sinai is a brit. Brit means covenant. But with every brit, you have a shvuah, an oath. And shvuah and Chag HaShavuot, Feast of Weeks, could also mean Feast of Oaths. Okay, let's read on Jubilees. Jubilees 6:11. On this account, he spake to you. This is an old English translation. On this account, he spoke to you that you should make a covenant with the children of Israel this month upon the mountain with an oath. So here, Book of Jubilees is connecting the covenant at Sinai in the third month with Shavuot, an oath. And it goes on in verse 17. I'm skipping ahead. For this reason it is ordained and written on the heavenly tablets that they should celebrate the Feast of Weeks in this month once a year to renew the covenant every year. Wow. So what it's saying in Jubilees is, why do you celebrate Shavuot? It's a renewal every year of the covenant of Sinai. And how do we know that? Because it's called Chag HaShavuot, Feast of Weeks, which also could mean, or at least it could allude to, the Feast of Oaths. Wow, that's pretty cool. Jubilees 200 BC. Some people may say it's older. I don't buy it. 200 BC is about what I'd give it. And it goes on in verse 20. And do thou command the children of Israel to observe this festival in all their generations for a commandment unto them. One day in the year in this month they shall celebrate the festival. For it is a feast of weeks and the feast of first fruit. The feast is twofold, of a double nature, according to as written and graven concerning it, celebrated. So what's the double nature in the book of Jubilees in 200 BC? It's the feast of harvest, first fruits. Nobody questions that. And it also is Chag HaShavuot, the feast of oaths, of renewing the oaths. Now, Shavuot doesn't literally mean oaths. It means weeks. Don't misunderstand. But it sounds almost identical to the word for oaths. And in certain forms of it, it is identical. When you have it in snichut, in the construct form, it's shvuot. If you looked at that one word by itself, you wouldn't know if it meant weeks or oaths. So that technical stuff, don't worry about it. All right, this is pretty cool. So we've got a connection in 200 BC between the Feast of Weeks and, on the one hand, the harvest, which isn't disputed, but also the renewal of the covenant. And if I remember, I want to get back to the renewal of the covenant in Jubilee 16, because that's a really important point. Renewing the covenant every year. That is a biblical concept that I want to talk about. All right. So Jubilees 22:1, one last thing. And it came to pass in the first week of the 44th Jubilee in the second year, that is in the year in which Abraham died, that Isaac and Ishmael came from the well of the oath to celebrate the Feast of Weeks. That is the feast of first fruit of the harvest to Abraham their father, and Abraham rejoiced because his two sons had come. So this is a complete fictitious story. I mean, it may have happened, but we don't have information in the Bible that Abraham celebrated Shavuot with Ishmael and Yitzchak, with Isaac and Ishmael and Isaac. And where did they celebrate Chag HaShavuot, the Feast of Weeks? They celebrated it at the well of the oath. What's the well of the oath? The well of the oath is Beersheba. How do I know that? Because Abraham tells us that he called it Beersheba, and there's two reasons. He took aside 7 sheep when he made the covenant with Abimelech, and 7 symbolized the oath. Why? Because 7 is Shiva, and oath is Shavuot, oath. What's the connection? So let's back up. Crash course in biblical Hebrew. Every word in biblical Hebrew has a 3-letter root. That's called the triliteral root theory. It was proven definitively by Jonah ibn Janach around the year 1100. There may be some exceptions, but we're not going to worry about that now. Basically, every word in the Hebrew Bible, or in biblical Hebrew, has a 3-letter root, and that's actually true of Arabic and Ge'ez and Aramaic and Akkadian. Every Semitic language has a 3-letter root system. And again, there are some exceptions that we won't worry about right now. Potential exceptions. That can be explained away or not. It doesn't matter. Okay, so what's the 3-letter root of the word for week, Shavuot? Shavua. The word for week is Sheva, Shin Bet Ayin, which means 7. What is the word for oath? Shavuot, Shin Bet Ayin, same 3 letters. So it's almost impossible not to make a connection between the word oath and the word 7. It's the same 3 letters. And Abraham explicitly makes that connection in Genesis 21:31-33, which I am now going to read. Therefore, he called the name of that place Beersheba, for there they swore, and they swore, there the two of them swore, Nishbe'u, Nishba'u is from the root shin bet ayin. It's the verb form of shavuah, which means oath. There they shavuot, they oathed. They made an oath, they swore. Vayichatu b'lit b'Beersheva, and he cut a covenant in Beersheva. And Abimelech and Pichol, his officer of his army, got up and they returned to the land of the Philistines. And I love this part, verse 33. And he planted an eshel, which is some kind of tree, in Beersheva, and he called there upon the name of Yehovah, the eternal God. Now I'm excited. Why am I excited? Because we've got three things. We've got a covenant that was made. It has the word brit in verse 32. We have an oath, shvuah, and we have calling on the name of Yehovah. Why does he call on the name of Yehovah? Because when you make an oath must be made in the name. And we're told about that in other places, and you can read my book. It's in one of my books. I don't remember where. Anyway, but it's clearly in the Bible. It's in three places. One is in Leviticus, and two are in Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy, it says, Ubishmiti Shavah, you shall swear in my name. It says that twice, two witnesses. And in Leviticus, it says, don't swear falsely in my name. So you've got do swear in my name and don't swear falsely in my name. Swearing is in the name of Yehovah. And so here he's made a covenant, and part of a covenant is you make an oath. And then you call upon the name of Yehovah. It's Genesis 21, 31 to 33. And he connects that to the word seven, which is the root of the word for week. So, okay, I'm not saying this is the doctrine that, Chag HaShavuot is the feast of the covenant of Sinai. But if you're an ancient Israelite and you're hearing about Chag HaShavuot, and you were there at Sinai and you told it's the same time of year, I can't see how you wouldn't make the connection. It really is a strong connection. Okay, and at the same time, I've got to say, why didn't somebody show me this? Why years ago, when I said, what is Shavuot? Prove to me Shavuot has to do with the covenant signing. Nobody said anything about oaths, and nobody said anything about calling upon the name of Yehovah, which is the main element of an oath. Why not? Because they had banned speaking Yehovah's name. So now we have to divert everybody to the oral law, because we don't want to talk about, calling on Yehovah's name. Wow. Okay. Genesis 22, 16 to 18. And he said, I swear by myself, says Yehovah. Why is Yehovah swearing by himself? Because an oath is made in the name of Yehovah. So Yehovah isn't going to say, I swear by Yehovah. He says, I swear by myself. And this is after the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, Genesis 22. It says, because you did this thing, and you did not hold back your son, your only son. Sorry, Ishmaelites. You did not hold back your son, your only son. For I will surely bless you, and I will surely increase your seed like the stars of the heaven and like the sand that is on the edge of the sea. And your seed shall inherit the gate of his enemy. And all the nations of the earth will be blessed in your seed because you obeyed my voice. So here we've got Yehovah swearing that he's going to make a great nation out of Abraham. And there's numerous verses where this is referred to. If you look, you can search in a Bible search program. I do it in Hebrew using the Hebrew root, which that's the best you can possibly do, because then there's no question that the word oath here is actually the word shvuah or lihi, which is the verb. As opposed to if you're looking in English, I don't know. Is it when it says oath? Is it neder? Is it some other word for oath? Is it Allah, perhaps, which is another word for oath, which also means curse? Anyway, but Shavuot is clearly, explicitly the word that means oath that's connected to the word seven, same root as the word seven, has to do with a covenant, and Yehovah made a Shavuot to Abraham. And there's other places where he made a covenant to Abraham. I'll bring one more. Genesis 26:3. It says, live in this land, and I will be with you, and I will bless you. For to you and your seed I will give all of these lands, and I will establish or fulfill the Shavuah, the oath, Ashel nishbati la'Avraham avicha. I'm sorry, this is Isaac he's talking to. Which I oathed, which I swore to Abraham your father. So here God's saying to Isaac, this wasn't just a one-time thing to Abraham. This doesn't have to do with Ishmael. This is you, Isaac. You're the one that I'm going to fulfill the oath, the shvuah, Ashel nishbati, the oath that I swore to Abraham your father. So there, twice in that verse, we have the same root, which is the word Shavuot, or it's related to the root. It's the word, actually, it is. It is the one that has to do with oath, which is the same three letters as the root that has to do with seven. Okay. All right. Now I really feel like I'm rambling. Okay. Deuteronomy 7:8. I don't think I can bring all these verses because there's so much. This should be an invitation for you guys to look up for yourselves and do some more research, that there is a connection between Shavuot, weeks, and Shavuot, which means oaths. Deuteronomy 7:8. Because of the love of Yehovah of you and his keeping of his oath, which he swore to your fathers, he has brought you out with a strong hand and he has redeemed you from the house of bondage, from the hand of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. So here again, Yehovah has this oath. One more, Jeremiah 11:5. In order to fulfill the Shavuot Shel Nishbati, in order to fulfill the oath that I oathed, or the swearing that I swore to Abraham, to give you the land flowing with milk and honey as this day, etc. So there, Jeremiah 11 is speaking again about the Shavuot, and there's other places, like I said, I can't bring them all. So I got to bring one more. Deuteronomy 4:31 says Yehovah won't forget the covenant he swore to the forefathers. That's really important. Why is it important? Because now we're speaking about how Yehovah swore, and his swearing, that's the covenant. And that was connected also in Genesis. But here it's being reiterated. For Yehovah is a merciful God. He shall not relent. He shall not destroy you. He shall not forget the covenant of your fathers, which he swore to them. So we've got this connection between covenant and swearing. And, we've seen this already. But why is that important? Because the covenant at Sinai, and here's the interesting thing, it never uses the word Shabbat or Shavuot to swear in Exodus 19 or in Deuteronomy when it tells the story of the revelation at Sinai or repeats it. It doesn't use that, which I find very interesting. I don't know why. It doesn't use that exact term. But there's clearly a connection between making an oath and a covenant. And so when Yehovah made the covenant at Sinai, that was a Shavuot. It was an oath. So here's the interesting thing. Remember, we have three elements. We have the oath, Brit. We have the covenant, Brit. We have the oath, Shavuot. And we have the name of Yehovah being proclaimed. So if Yehovah made a covenant at Sinai, well, where's his name, right? I mean, what are you saying, Nehemia? Yehovah made a covenant and didn't use the name? That's how he started the Ten Commandments. He started the Ten Commandments, and he opened up and he said, Exodus 20, verse 2, I am Yehovah, your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. That's the oath. That's the Shavuot right there. Yehovah is proclaiming his name and speaking something in his name, and something you speak in the name of Yehovah, that is an oath. It must be true. If you speak in the name of Yehovah in vain, falsely, then you have broken an oath. That's wow. So you're wondering, okay, where does it say that the covenant of Sinai is an oath? It's in the first three words, Anochi Yehovah Elohecha. I am Yehovah, your God. He's swearing by himself. This is the covenant. This is the Brit. This is the Shavuot. This is the oath. So I think there is a connection, after all, between Shavuot and the covenant at Sinai. It was the same time of year. The word for weeks, Shavuot, also has the almost identical meaning, almost identical pronunciation, and in some instances, the identical pronunciation of the word for oath. This connection was made 200 BC, so I'm not the first one to come up with it. We have the proclaiming of the name of Yehovah, we have the covenant, and we have an oath. I think there's a connection there. Okay, so the the Book of Jubilees said the Feast of Weeks, and what's the Feast of Weeks? The purpose, according to the Book of Jubilees, is to renew the covenant every year. Is that a biblical concept, renewing the covenant every year? So here's what we can say for sure. Renewing the covenant is definitely a biblical concept. And where do I see that? And you should listen to the Torah Pearls on Deuteronomy 5. I talk about this. Deuteronomy 5, 2-3 says something very mysterious. It says, Yehovah your God has cut with you a covenant in Horeb. Not with your fathers, Yehovah has cut this covenant, but with you, us, these who are here today, all of you alive. Deuteronomy 5:3. Well, that's actually not strictly speaking true. Meaning, if you take him literally, Moses is a liar. Because those people hadn't been born yet, or some of them may have been born, but they were children. But many of them had never even been born. And it was with the fathers. Remember, the whole generation that made the covenant died. So why does he say that? And I think there's a deeper message here. The people hearing that would have said, well, wait a minute, it was with our fathers. So what does he mean? And I think, to me, it's obvious what he means. What he means is this covenant isn't just with your fathers, it's with you today. It's renewed in every year, in every generation, that covenant at Sinai. And this is a concept we see throughout the Tanakh of renewing the covenant. And I'll just throw out some verses and you look them up yourself. Genesis 15:18 is Brit Bein HaPetalim, the covenant between the pieces, this whole dramatic scene where Abraham cuts these animals in half and walks between the pieces. Go to Jeremiah 34:18-19. They renewed that covenant in the time of Jeremiah. And it talks about them walking between the pieces. That's a renewal of the covenant. It's not that there's different covenants. There's not the covenant that God made in Genesis 15 and the covenant he made in Genesis 26 and another covenant he made at Sinai. No, these are all the same covenant that's being renewed generation after generation. And you can see that in a number of places. Joshua 23 is a renewal of the covenant. Jeremiah 31 talks about the Brit Chadashah. It's not a new covenant. It's a renewal of the covenant. There's a great passage in Ezra which talks about, and Nehemiah, which talk about renewing the covenant. And my favorite one that I'm going to end with is Ezekiel 16, verse 18. And I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but the whole context is describing how God chose Israel. And Israel was, first this newborn babe, and then she grew up and she was this beautiful young woman. And it's a metaphor of Yehovah marrying Israel. It's the marriage between Yehovah and Israel. And in 16:8, when I passed by you again and saw that your time for love had arrived, so now you're a grown woman. So I spread my robe over you and covered your nakedness, and I entered into a covenant with you by oath, declares Lord Yehovah. Thus you became mine. So how did Israel become Yehovah's people? He married us. And where did he marry us? That was at Sinai. And how is this described metaphorically in Ezekiel 16:8? He entered into covenant with us, Brit, and he made an oath, a Shavuot. So this isn't just Nehemia saying there's a connection between Chag HaShavuot, the Feast of Weeks, which also could mean the Feast of Oaths. Ezekiel 16:8 connects the covenant at Sinai explicitly with Yehovah making an oath. So I will wish you a happy Chag HaShavuot. I'm going to say it in Hebrew. Chag Shavuot Sameach, Chag Katzil v'Yom HaBikurim Sameach. Happy Feast of Weeks, happy Feast of Harvest and Day of First Fruits, and happy Feast of Oaths. Remember the covenant of Sinai and renew the covenant this year with Yehovah. Enter into that covenant and renew it during Shavuot this year. Shalom from Changsha, China.
You have been listening to Nehemia Gordon's Raw Stream of Torah Consciousness. Thank you for supporting Nehemia's Makor Hebrew Foundation. Learn more at nehemiaswall.com.